All right. Hey, everyone. It is October 28th, and this is Service API's office hours. As always, we are recording, and we've got lots and lots to get to. It's been a productive week, it seems. Um, and right off the bat, Damien has a great question here of, my interpretation is if, as we're looking through V1 Alpha 1 milestone, if there's things that we can potentially prioritize, and maybe more specifically, if we can set a firm release date and stick to it. So my interpretation of this question, Dadian, you feel free to correct me, is that we should have a firm release date, whatever that is that we agree to, and then we would have a very small number of issues that could block that release if they were not resolved, but otherwise we would release on that date. Or I don't know. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
You're spot on.
Okay.
And my thinking
Cool.
is like, if we need to build in a little buffer, but I think it's really important that we set a date and we commit to that date. And as part of that, maybe it makes sense to go through what we have tagged for V1 Alpha 1, assign some priorities to things just to make sure that, hey, we're going to try to get everything we can in, but let's at least make sure we're focusing on the priorities for V1 Alpha 1.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think we're just awfully close, and we have been for a while. And at some point, we need to release a V1 Alpha 1. And for those in the US, we're getting awfully close to the aforementioned holiday season, where there is it seems like nothing ever gets done between Thanksgiving. So once you start to hit that window, it would be good to have stuff done before then. And that's a very vague timeline, but it does seem to go along with the idea that setting a firm release date would be a very good idea at this point.
And I'm fine with either before the the holiday season or after, as long as we can set a date and we are committed to releasing on that date.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with that, we should really look through this, and I'm not sure how we want to prioritize this, and what we would consider blockers on a V1 Alpha 1 release. Let's see, a user guide to documentation. I know Harry's already been working on a few. He's already added some guides, which is awesome. It does feel like we need something here, but it's a little bit less clear how much we need here before we consider it good enough for V1 Alpha 1. The examples and documentation, this, maybe this is pointing to us needing to restructure some of these issues so they're a little bit more fine-grained, because right now we have some pretty broad examples. I'd say that we have a lot of these covered thanks to Harry's work on both getting started and TLS. But we could use more. I don't know. I'm just trying to process this through as I'm looking through these issues right now. It seems like we have a number of open issues that feel too broad. This one is nearly done. I think James, you just need to, James isn't on this call. He just needs to rebase his PR one more time, and this should go in.
Yeah, I think except documentation, we have a pretty good grasp on what needs to get into V1 Alpha 1. But documentation is certainly something we are lacking right now, and yeah, I don't know what quality we want by V1 alpha.
Yeah. One of the things, this one is also, I think this will be fixed pretty quickly with your PR, Harry. The one that I mean, there's a few different ones that I can think of. Well, one in particular is the one I've been working on policy examples for how we could restrict usage of gateway classes. This is actually a relatively large project that may not be a blocker on V1 Alpha 1. I have started on it, but I would be open to, making this less of a blocker on V1 Alpha 1 actually getting released. Just as long as because right now what the documentation says is, we don't support this in the API. You may want to use your policy agent of choice to implement this instead, but we haven't provided any examples of how they might do that. It would be nice to have, but I don't think it's required.
Yeah, I consider it nice to have too. And I wonder as kind of we work through this process, if it makes sense to kind of go through the list and look at each one and I don't know if we have priority labels or could be just a priority high, medium, low, just kind of get them organized. And then we could go ahead and say, all right, there's a lot of noise here, right? 16, whatever issues, but we've got whatever number that's priority high. And let's look at those and really kind of go through them with a fine-tooth comb to say, okay, which of these high priorities are really, a kind of a release blocker? I don't know. That was my train of thought. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And I think we could take a shortcut here. The UI already shows the ones that we already have PRs in for. And so I'd say there's no need in triaging them because they'll probably be resolved. What I would say is we have a number that do not. And maybe for these ones, we should add some kind of priority label. So in this case, I don't know what. Yeah, unfortunately, this is the Kubernetes label. So it
important
is
long-term. My vote would be important long-term.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go with that. Okay. And then we have case insensitive header matching. This is a complex
it's a bug.
one.
You could classify it as a bug, and it's
okay.
Yeah, is it really important for V1 Alpha 1?
I would say no.
Exactly, my point too.
It's again in that bucket of nice to have, but it shouldn't block the release, in my opinion.
I think I'll put this up to is soon appropriate, or would you prefer long term?
No, I would say important soon. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So like in my thinking, that becomes kind of like high on the list post V1 Alpha 1 release. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Which one's this one? I thought this was already okay. Harry, you volunteered for this one, but you have not. There's not a PR yet.
Yeah, I assigned myself, but then I had too much, so I gave it.
Yeah, yeah, you've been doing a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, unassign if you want to, Harry or Rob. You could assign me, or Harry, unassign yourself, and let me take this on.
Awesome. So Danian or Harry, where do you think this falls on priority list?
Let me take a look at this. I just kind of signed myself up for something I don't even know what it's about, but
yeah, no. So this came from the pre-alpha review, and we do not have a way right now to just match everything, or we have not made it clear, especially on TCP route and UDP route. Like if there are no matches, what happens? So the easiest way to do this is to specify that if no matches are specified, all requests should match. That is not currently in the spec. but seems like a relatively reasonable interpretation. The other option would be to update match to have a, a from all extension refs or none type enum. That would give us a bit more flexibility, but that would take more work.
Yeah, I think we should add this in V1 alpha 1 so that. Yeah, I think let's do this so users can at least properly actually. We can have a concrete example of how to use this CRD, right? Like right now in the current form, I don't think we can even have like a good concrete example.
Yeah. So in that case, do we do the highest priority for this one?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and I'll be able to start working on it most likely before the end of this week.
Great, thanks. Let me refresh because these labels are not coming through. Okay, the user guide for documentation. This feels like soon to me.
Yes.
Bowie, for I think you just joined. We've been going through these bugs and just trying to prioritize what absolutely has to come in before V1 Alpha 1, and we're giving those the critical urgent priority. Soon would be the first thing after V1 Alpha 1 launches, if not before, and long-term is sometime during the V1 Alpha 1 cycle, but probably not before. So that is the logic we've been going on here. And of course, there's many of these issues in this milestone are already completed. So we're just trying, or have PRs in them. So not prioritizing them, but the ones that don't currently have a PR associated with them, trying to get some kind of priority for them. This feels awfully close already. We have TLS. Actually, maybe this is all we have in documentation right now.
We have that, and then the first one is in PR. The other ones are going to come through. I don't know how much we need for, again. Like this is a really vague issue. That's the problem.
It is a very vague issue. I'm going to call this critical urgent, but I think we should consider it complete once we have, at least 3 of 4 of these done. I don't know. TLS, well, I don't know what, should we instead split this out into several different issues?
I mean, that'd be like a checkbox list, and then we can check them up.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Gotta remember how Markdown works. This.
You had to go. You need that hyphen before the box braces. You need a hyphen before the braces. There you go. That should do it. Look at the preview just to make sure. There you go.
Good call. And hopefully any maintainer can update these or mark them as checked off, but I know we have at least this. Cool.
Yeah, really quick too, while we're here, let's look at these, and I wonder, maybe like, do we need to have all these boxes checked to say we're unblocked, right? So maybe let's just talk really quick and maybe put an asterisk next to the ones that we feel like are must-haves, or are any of them must-haves?
I think we absolutely need this.
Okay.
Like that's the most common use case. The rest.
I'd say the second one too.
Yeah. This is a nice to have.
I would agree. So maybe just make a note at the bottom really quick of that comment that's that's kind of like a key that says asterisk means these are must-haves for V1 Alpha 1 release.
Okay. Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, it's I could start seeing this light. The light at the end of the tunnel is getting a little bit closer.
Yep. I always forget Markdown and star. Well, sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah, that looks just fine.
All right. So this is a little bit in between important soon and critical urgent. I think I'm going to make it critical urgent just so it gets visibility. Does that seem reasonable?
It does. And I see that Bowie's assigned to this, and since Bowie's on, if you go back to the meeting notes for today, I also added another section of like pinging assignees for issues without progress and unassign as needed. So Bowie, do you feel like here in the near future you'd be able to tackle any of these checkboxes? Otherwise, do you want to unassign yourself?
Yeah, if people want to, there can be multiple assignees.
Oh, okay.
So
I guess the thing is, like, I'm sorry, Rob, I went through kind of the list just the other week, and I found myself like, okay, should I work on this or not? Because like there's an assignee on there. And I guess I don't know if maybe I'm missing something, but I tend to, if someone's assigned to something, it's like, okay, I'm just kind of reluctant to work on it.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
I mean, put my name on this. I'm already working on this, and I think, yeah, I can get this done pretty. I think I have a couple of PRs that I'm waiting for to get merged.
Okay.
And I think that the 3 checkboxes that we want, I think, can be checked out pretty easily.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And perfect. Since Harry and Bowie are on the call, like if you guys are going to work on this, do me a favor and just maybe make a note to say, okay, here's the checkbox I'm going to work on. So if someone does come to this issue, maybe even myself, and it's like, oh, okay, I'll work on the 4th checkbox since you guys are working on, 1 and 2.
Sounds good.
Yeah, makes sense. Great, thank you. Let's keep on going here. The case and insensitive, we've already prioritized this. I think we can just go ahead and call this important, either soon or long term. I don't see this as a blocker.
Yeah, I think it's long term. So, I mean, we don't even know how this is going to work. So,
yeah.
And maybe let's look at only issues which are in the V1 Alpha 1 milestone, right? Rather than
so yeah. If you can filter it. I thought I was going back to the milestone. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so this has a PR. This one, I pinged Renner on this, and it doesn't look like he's responded yet. Harry, how do you feel about prioritizing this one?
I think we can, it's an alpha. I think we can leave it out. Like people generally understand what is the, I don't know, this is an implicit understanding where, how path and headers are matched, their priority. But I would say important zone here.
Okay. That works.
But I mean, if you ship V1 Alpha 1 without this, I think that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. And then the gateway and gateway class, I would also call this a soon, because like we already have a lot of documentation around both of these resources.
Yeah, I've looked at this before and I am like scratching my head, like, what is it that we're missing?
Yeah. Yeah, I spent some time looking at this. I know I volunteered myself for this. I think there's a bit more that can be said based on this discussion, just to kind of answer some of the questions that came up here, but I don't think it's critical for our documentation. Like, if you really want to dig, you can find it. but it's hard to fit in. I spent a little bit of time looking at how I would add this, and yeah. Actually, maybe this should be long term. All right. Have examples for a lot of these.
I think all the other issues are already,
Yeah.
other than the last two are, yeah, we already prioritized them. Others are already getting.
Yeah, everything already has a priority or has a PR. And so the ones that we gave critical urgent that don't have a PR are 2. And these are what we want to block on for V1 Alpha 1.
If we look at these 2 along with the PRs that are in flight,
yeah, there's a lot of PRs in flight.
Yeah. Maybe as a next step, do we want to go through any of these PRs and see, like,
yes,
are they stale? Okay.
Yeah, that's yeah, absolutely. Let me first run through. I wanted to get through a couple other things first. Do we want to release? Well, the release candidate discussion will be a good way to conclude this, I think, once we have an idea of where the PRs are headed. I wanted to just briefly run through this. This is not V1 Alpha 1, so I don't want to waste much time on it. I just want to raise your attention. We had some interesting names come in. That's all I'll say here. I think I want to leave this and let it run for another week or so, see if we get any more interesting names. I don't want, well, no, this name definitely came from Tim.
Like Vortex.
Yes. Yes.
Or, can you add black hole? Can you add a black hole in line 27 for me?
Yeah, anyone can edit this this list. So the more names, the merrier. We're still behind the number of names that got suggested for multi-cluster. So.
Oh, is it a competition? Okay.
Yes.
Didn't know that. Yeah. So essentially, if I do really like Gateway, I just have to suggest like really bad names, right? So
yes. Yes. That's exactly it. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have some more time to talk about if any of these actually seem better than Gateway, and rule out any that definitely we don't want to go forward with. But yeah, don't want to spend too much time here. Just a reminder that it exists, and if you have any ideas or want to share it with anyone who might, by all means. Bowie, I think you're trying to say something. Sorry, it was a little choppy. Oh, there's chat. I'll pay attention. Yeah, there's a short link. It's bit.ly service APIs naming. And then the next one, so this is something that we said was long-term or soon, but not something that is blocking V1 Alpha 1 release. So I also don't want to spend much time on this, but I just wanted to let you know that this seems to work, and I've started some kind of discussion, I guess, with the OPA maintainers to see if this kind of thing fits in their gatekeeper library. And I need to update the GitHub issue for service APIs naming. Thank you, Bowie. Yeah. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time here because we have a lot of PRs that are very worthwhile. But if you're interested in Rego or very likely better at it than me, this is my first time writing any Rego and it's rather messy. Definitely feel free to give some feedback or try it out. And let's with that, let's run back to the V1 Alpha 1 milestone and specifically pick PRs that are associated with this, just so we can. I don't think we've been as good at adding milestones to PRs, so I'm trying to look at it this way instead. This is James' PR to update the FAQ, and this just needs a rebase, so I'll move on. I thought this already merged.
The CI is failing on that one right now.
Oh, how did I? Oh, I need to rebase. Surely that's what it is. Or maybe another example failed in the middle here. Cool. Okay. Yes. Well, if we had had this earlier, we would have caught these. This is definitely something that I let through. So I'll fix the examples in this PR. But for anyone who missed it, there soon will be a fix to this that verifies examples with kind. Okay, what else should I go through? Future proofing protocol type. I think this one is super close as well. Yeah,
I think it
approve this.
It needs an LGTM.
Yeah. So I just wanted somebody else to add the final LGTM on this. It got to a really tiny point. It's really just, here are our core protocols. You can specify any one of these. And if you don't use them, I just use a domain prefix on any protocol you use beyond that. This is similar to app protocol, except it does not limit or suggest that, a large list of, the RFC service names could be used here, and instead just says core protocol types or domain prefixed custom types. This seems like a reasonable starting point to me. I just wanted somebody else to take a look and make sure it was also reasonable to them. Does anyone have any hesitation around this approach?
I haven't had a chance to look at it, but
Okay.
I can take a look at it after we're done with the call and tag it, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, that's perfect. Let me just, so it shows up in your inbox. Cool. What else is
I put a
on
link
here?
to PR mine in the chat window that I think is pretty straightforward, that resolves an issue. So there's issue 409 that there is feedback on.
Oh, right. Thank you.
So for
you
both,
added a new reason.
Yeah, and so for both the IP address type or the named address type, if you specify either or and it's not supported, right? I mean, you could essentially do the same for both, right? I specify some address that the controller says, no, this is not like an address range I support, for example, or I think the core of the issue is with the named address type that I updated the Go docs. We already have the detached listener status condition type. So that would be surfaced along with unsupported address for either of those listener address types.
Okay. Yeah, this looks very straightforward to me. I just need to run through this to look for any typos, but the concept makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. I think it's fairly straightforward. So if everyone wants to take a look at it and provide feedback, and if it looks good, then it could be tagged
in that, so I don't forget it. I would assign myself or CC myself, but I'm already there. So yeah, cool. And I'm just running through these. This is done. Protocol type we've gone through. This Harry has added a great PR around documenting the release process. I think this is worth talking through a little bit. This came from an issue where John Howard had pointed out that using non-Semver tags for releases really does not work well with GoMod. So if you're trying to import this with our initial pre-release tag, it does not play nicely. So the idea is going forward, we'd use v0.1.0 at least for the v1 alpha 1 release, and continue through there. And Harry, you've documented a few different things here, including basically new minor release versions for new alpha or beta APIs. And then when we go GA, we'd go to v1.0, which to me all makes sense. You've also, maybe the most controversial thing in here, I don't think it's controversial, is that we will leave room for bug fixes and clarifications in the spec as part of new patch numbers. And also we'll leave room for new minor versions that, new minor versions always can correspond to a new API version. Yeah, I mean, to me, this all seems very sensible and allows us to play a little bit more nicely with Go modules. I've already approved this one. This just needs someone to run through it in LGTM. Let me double check. Yes, I have approved. Okay, cool. Let me CC you on that. All right. Upstream protocol. Yeah, this is going to be a bigger discussion. There's two. I can't shortcut through here. I think, yes, this is the one I want. Harry, why don't you give some background here? Because I know I've given some feedback, but you may have a better overall picture.
Right. So this is while using, if you want to change, like specify the protocol, the gateway and the upstream service, what protocol the gateway should initiate the connection on. There is no way in the API to define that. We can use the app protocol field, but that's only available in 1.18 and higher. So this is sort of a stopgap solution where we introduce an annotation on the service resource, which would be like networking.x-cadence.io/app protocol. And then you can define the protocol to use for each specific port. Right. So the idea here is to give a solution that works for 116, 117. And by the time this API actually gets some good adoption, my current thought is maybe 1.18 will be already mainstream, and that most of our users will come from there, right? And so we can release this v1 alpha 1 with this annotation in there, but we discourage the use of the annotation in newer versions of Cube. So yeah, that's what this PR does. I think there's been some good feedback, and from Rob that maybe this annotation could be a field on backend policy, or maybe this annotation should actually be in the backend policy resource. So I think we need more thoughts here, like how everyone feels in here. I've tried to do a stopgap solution. What I'm a little confused right now is, do we need a stopgap solution, or should we actually solve this problem in the API where, if an upstream is some other resource, and if it does not have a field which has semantically the same meaning as app protocol, then how do users specify the upstream protocol, right? So do we solve it for the larger case by introducing a field in somewhere in a resource that we control in this project? Or do we solve it only for service and then introduce the field later in future after some feedback?
The more I've thought about this, the more I think the annotation on service is the correct approach here. I was originally thinking about, well, a number of different things, notably backend policy. But I think you're the one who pointed out that service could work better than my initial suggestion. So it initially started on HTTP route here, and I don't think that's the best fit. But I also don't know that backend policy was the best fit unless we wanted to make this a long-term thing that we supported indefinitely. I think an annotation is probably a reasonable thing to put directly on the backend itself, in this case, the service. And that same pattern could, in the future, apply to other resources that were referenced that may not be service. If they need some concept like app protocol, because annotation can be anywhere.
Yeah, I think we need to be very careful with the feedback in this regard, because I think we should discourage using this annotation for other resources as well, right? Like if we have enough number of use cases where this field, this information is needed, and there are no good places to record it, and people are shoving it inside an annotation, then it's probably a good sign that maybe we should include that inside somewhere in our API, right? And like that's just a signal, and then we can sit down and think, maybe backend policy, maybe there could be multiple options at that point. So that's why we shouldn't encourage. If we encourage and using this annotation a lot, I think it's going to the similar route of ingress class annotation, right? So it could be a standard, but yeah, any of structured information inside annotation is complicated, as you know.
So this wouldn't actually need to be structured though, right? This is just a single, or okay, it would need to be structured because service can have multiple ports.
Yeah, so if you just scroll down, that's where I think our hesitations start to crop up, are those two examples that I have in there, right?
Yeah.
Where there is a specific way this information is encoded into the value of the annotation.
Yeah, and okay, you're right. Yeah, and that's why I started to go down the route of backend policy, because backend policy can be used to apply to a specific port on a service. Exactly, so you could have a single key value without this kind of complex annotation.
Yes, so that's where we enter into the realm of, okay, how can we make this simpler for the user, right? And then the scope of the problem can expand pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see a fair number of users messing up lines 50 and 51.
Yeah. And now that I'm realizing that, yeah, we'd need to have the same kind of syntax or the same kind of, whatever for if we move that annotation to service, that's also not ideal. So I do like the simplicity of just specifying a app protocol and a string value, like a single HTTP as an example on backend policy. That does feel simpler to me than any of the options where we have the potential for multiple ports.
Yeah, I think we should probably take some time, add in some more comments here, and we don't want this issue to take up too much time on the call itself. So.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and speaking of comments, if you go back to the conversation, Rob, scroll to the top. Harry, would you up to the top conversation?
Of this.
For the conversation.
Sorry, is this the view you want?
I wanted to go to the top of PR 421, define app protocol annotation.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I went back an extra time here.
Yeah, if you go to the top, description's empty, no link to an issue or anything like that. Harry, do you mind maybe just giving a little background there to make it easier for someone to jump in and kind of be brought up to speed? And if we don't have an issue defined for this, then something's missing.
Yeah, let me do that. I
Cool. Thanks,
switched
Harry.
my back.
Cool, good catch. All right, let's keep on moving. So this is also one that could probably use a bit of attention. This is trying to unify how gateway hostname and HTTP route hostnames are defined. I think we've discussed this briefly in the past. The idea that well, okay, let me give the background right now of these two things just don't match. On gateway, we support domain exact any as hostname match types, and on HTTP route, we had this kind of wildcard matching. And based on that, and based on another issue that was very related, where we had, no good default here of a match type of any when hostname isn't even used. I tried to solve them both by, in this case, using the same wildcard pattern that we were using on HTTP route. So pulling away from enum entirely. And I think I've got some examples down here that, yeah, there you go. So instead of hostname, match, and name, just using the exact same pattern that we're using on HTTP route for hostname matching. The significant advantage of this approach, in my opinion, is that we can leave hostname blank and unspecified entirely for protocols where it doesn't matter. Whereas previously we wanted to do something like hostname match any or something like else, which I don't know. And this also, maybe importantly, matches the same syntax that we're using on HTTP route. I think it would get more confusing to try and bring this syntax down to HTTP route, the enum-based syntax. And I also struggled to find a way that we would expand the types of matching. So we had domain, any, and exact, and all of those felt like they could be expressed with this kind of wildcard matching. And I couldn't think of any more advanced use cases than that, but I know that's a dangerous thing to say.
Yeah, do the dance.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I guess like we could also, if we needed different types of matching, we could do the dance we did with Ingress GA. So there is a known path to adding something later.
Yeah. As far as what we did with path matching, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I think this approach is reasonably straightforward, but it does represent a relatively significant change here. So if anyone has time to take a look, I know I've gotten some great feedback from James and Harry on this one. I think all the feedback that I've gotten so far has been resolved. So if anyone can take one more look, maybe while we have this PR open, does this approach feel wrong, like the wrong direction to take to anyone? Just you don't have to comment on the entirety of the PR and its accuracy or whatever, but just this general direction, does it seem appropriate? I'll take silence as consensus. That's so I know we've got plenty more PRs to run through, so I'll keep on moving here. The final one, so updating named address type and IP address type. This is one we just went through.
Yeah,
Yes,
we looked at this just a few minutes back.
Yes. All right. So actually, the last PR. Look at this. Oh, It's the same one.
That's it.
I'm really going through. Great.
Just double checking everything.
Yeah. That's what happens when you have a PR that I guess fixes too. All right. So that means that through this meeting, we've managed to triage all the ones that do not have PRs associated with them, and I think make decent progress on the existing PRs. And the ones that might be a little stuck have people that have volunteered to follow up and continue reviewing on this one. So I think we're in a good state here. Let's take it back to kind of our original question then, which is, well, twofold. Can we set a release date, like a firm release date? And two, do we want to do another release candidate? I think these are both pretty closely related. So if I'm understanding the scope of what we'd want in V1 Alpha 1, it involves merging all the existing PRs we have, or at least PRs tied to V1 Alpha 1, plus it involves two more issues that we've categorized as critical, both of them related to documentation. Well, yeah, ish. So with that in mind, how do we feel about timeline, and how do we feel about the need for another RC between now and a V1 Alpha 1 release?
Did you take into account PRs that have merged since the RC was cut?
I have not. That's a good question. Let's run through. There should be a way to. 21 days ago, is there? I forget the GitHub compare UI, but
you were just back there though.
Right.
Have 51 commits to master since this release.
Thank you. That's impressive. A lot of these are bug fix related. Allowing a weight of 0. Documentation. Yeah. Okay, this is a API change, removing client certificate ref from backend policy. The route selection naming, that is an API change. This one is a relatively significant API change, and that we're removing something. Okay.
How many days ago did it say? 21 days ago since RC1 was cut?
Yeah. Some colon, some various port is now required. So yeah, there have been a few API changes.
So I guess I have a couple questions that I feel like will help with the decision. Is one is how much effort was it, Rob, to cut a release candidate, and then I think part of it too is like how far away do we think we are from V1 Alpha 1? I mean, if we're talking a week or two, V1 Alpha 1 doesn't necessarily make sense, especially if there was a fair bit of work that it took to make the release candidate happen. Is that time better spent just focusing on the V1 Alpha 1 release?
So there's almost no time. So the initial release candidate was just about, establishing consensus that it was time. The actual complexity was limited to writing this release note. The next RC is going to be most complex because we have committed to updating a changelog for every additional release. But with that said, any effort we spend on a changelog for RC2, we don't, that's just less that we have to do for a changelog for V1 Alpha 1.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I'd say the net cost is relatively minimal, other than just establishing the right time to cut an RC. I know I've been overly optimistic before as far as timeline on release cadence. It does feel like we have a pretty concrete list of to-dos, but even still, I think we're probably 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, but let's say 2 weeks from a final release here. And given that maybe there is room for one more RC, it does, we had 51 commits. I think I counted 3 or 4 API changes at least. That could be worth another RC. I don't know.
No, it's great points, and I mean, with that said, I am in favor of cutting an RC2.
Okay.
Either for what does everyone think? If they agree, either the 30th or the 2nd. And I'm also looking at the calendar for V1 Alpha 1, and I think when we hit that week of the November 23rd, that's when things like come to a grinding halt for pretty much most of the rest of the year. And so as I look at that, I think, V1 Alpha 1, again, we look at either the 20th of November, the 23rd of November. So what does everyone else think?
So does that's 3 weeks out? V1 Alpha 1?
Yeah, you said 2, and I'm just thinking, it always seems to be like whatever you think, add another, add some more time to it, because there's just always something that happens.
Yeah.
And it would be really nice, I think, for us to, to go into this holiday break of, being able to pat ourselves on the back and say, okay, we hit this first milestone, and I don't think we'll get as much activity, with the holidays and so forth. But at least, I think, working on this project as long as we have, it at least ends the year on the right note for ourselves.
Yeah, completely agree.
So do we get any feedback from release candidates?
Not that I'm aware of. I have not seen any. Technically we got John's feedback just as far as this tag not working well for it, but otherwise not particularly. The real value I see in release candidates is, I guess, twofold. One, getting us used to pushing releases out there, so that when we actually are ready for V1 Alpha 1, we have some experience in what works and what doesn't. But then the other value I see is for anyone who might be trying to implement this API, there's a little bit of, communication around what's changed and a clear reference point for the version you're working with and implementing. But again, I think there's relatively few people who are actively implementing, but for those that are, I think it is valuable.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, it's showing progress in that we're taking a structured approach to making that progress. I like the release candidate. There's been, as we saw, enough of API changes to warrant the release candidate, in my opinion. And Rob, as you mentioned, is like that change log is, we're gonna have to deal with that no matter what. So we might as well bite that bullet. But it does get me thinking to Harry's PR of that release documentation. It would be nice at some point, maybe not for that initial PR, but to somehow document, what is being done here, Rob, so that, we kind of share that burden. And you don't have to always be responsible for this, but maybe since you've taken this on, it's something that you could add to Harry's document to help others follow that process.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we would have a much more automated release flow, but right now, I mean, GitHub's release interface is so simple that you can tag a version based on the latest commit of master, title, changelog, and it will do everything else for you. So there is, very little
I think
secret
we have
sauce
to
here.
this generically with I think we have to resolve releasing the period. After we get the alpha out, we have to figure out, first of all, there is Kubernetes release versus this release. And then we also have to use the CRAL or the Kubernetes open source infrastructure to do all this stuff, which will not be used in this process, I imagine.
Yeah, Bowie, that's a great point. It makes me think, do we have an issue that highlights what you just said, Bowie? Does anyone know if we do have an issue? If not,
I don't know specifically, but yeah, up until alpha, it's like the overhead is probably just way too much. But as soon as we release alpha, we need that's going to be like a criteria for beta is to sort all that stuff out.
Yeah. I was just thinking how we were prioritizing the issues. That made me think that would be kind of like a good, I don't know, either long-term type of issue, but just something that we can make sure that we capture that issue.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. So it sounds like we should talk to someone from SIG Release then about any recommendations they might have. Cool. Okay. Well,
I almost think like we have to kind of even, because are there any other CRDs that are in a good state? Maybe cluster APIs, does that do something?
Yeah, cluster API seems to be consistently be the standard that we can reference, but again, they're a little bit different as they have a significant amount of implementation built in associated with the API, whereas we are just an API at this point. And even if, the only other thing we'd have is a webhook in here, which would make sense to version along with the API. So, yeah.
So before we close out, do we feel like we've come to consensus that an RC2 will be cut at the end of the week or on Monday, and that we can go ahead and put a milestone date for V1 Alpha 1 as like November 20th or 23rd? Is there any objection to doing that?
I would prefer the earlier of those dates, and I would, on both counts, I think I'd prefer getting an RC out on Friday of this week, if that works for everyone else. And then I'm assuming the 20th is a Friday as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems approximately right. I'm not quite ready to commit to a date yet, but I think that's a good one to pencil in. I think, we meet really quickly for anyone who happens to be around in the morning slot tomorrow. I think it's a morning meeting tomorrow. I've lost track. Whenever we meet tomorrow, I'd like to finalize that date as well.
That's kind of what I was thinking, if we could put it on the agenda for we're talking about for tomorrow's meeting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been great to prioritize all our PRs, and I think we have a reasonable time frame now, a reasonable timeline. So thanks everyone for the help.
All right, thank you. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Talk to you later.